This is a scene the French government wants to avoid. A city of tents in the port city of Calais, where refugees wait for their chance to start a new life across the Channel in Britain. For many locals, the so-called jungle was a stain on the region and a headache for authorities. Last year, the jungle was bulldozed to the ground. Refugees tried resettling in Paris, but eventually were moved on again. Over the last few months, many have been returning to Calais.
The old jungle was very good. A charity came to give us food twice a day, but now a few cars come to bring us food. If we want to sleep, we go to the forest. We have nothing.
Compared to last year's nearly 10,000 refugees living inside the jungle, there's thought to be around 400 people sleeping rough in Calais, mainly from Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Afghanistan. France's highest administrative court has ruled that the Calais region must provide refugees with the basics: drinking water, toilets, and showers.
The biggest need here is for people to be able to wash themselves. Some refugees have not taken a shower in months.
2 smaller reception centers have now opened in towns outside Calais to avoid another jungle emerging.
Plans have been put in place with the concern in mind that no reception center should be opened in Calais itself, bearing in mind its history.
Compte tenu de l'histoire.
According to a report by Human Rights Watch, life on the streets of Calais has taken a grim turn. Refugees say local police are actively abusing and harassing adults and children. 17-year-old Biniam T told Human Rights Watch,
"If they catch us when we are sleeping, they will pepper spray us and take all of our stuff. Every 2 or 3 days they do this. They'll come and take our blankets."
France's new president, Emmanuel Macron, has called for better treatment of migrants and to relocate more people.
La France, sur le sujet des réfugiés, n'a pas toujours pris sa part. Je veux dire ici que nous sommes en train d'accélérer les relocalisations et que nous continuerons à le faire.
Macron has also pledged to renegotiate France's border agreement with the UK known as Le Touquet, which allows British border checks on French soil, a prospect Prime Minister Theresa May has not ruled out. With greater numbers of people on the way, Macron may be forced to confront the conditions in Calais head-on. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Burlington, Vermont, is Michael Bohenick. He's a senior researcher for the Human Rights Watch Council on Children's Rights. He authored that report on Calais refugees, which you've just heard. And from Paris is Émeric Merlot. He's an advisor for France's National Front Party. Gentlemen, good to have you with us. Michael, let me start with you, because you spoke to more than 60 asylum seekers and migrants in and around Calais and Dunkirk. And some of what you document sounds horrific. Police using pepper spray on kids, taking people's clothing and sleeping bags away from them. What kind of impact has this had on refugees?
Well, certainly it has a devastating impact on their ability to have, for example, a basic night's sleep and enjoy what we would regard as the basic necessities of life. If they are woken up repeatedly in the night and sprayed with pepper spray or some other chemical agent, if their clothing and sleeping bags are destroyed by this spray or rendered unusable, if they're taken in some instances, and if they're prevented from having access to humanitarian distributions of food and other aid, then of course this makes life very, very difficult for them. And indeed, that may be well the purpose of it, to drive them away from the city where they've gathered.
And you're saying that the authorities are turning a blind eye to this action by French police?
Well, certainly the French police are doing this. If the accounts we're receiving and the accounts that we've heard from humanitarian workers and the consistent reports of other aid groups and other studies are accurate, and there's no reason at this point to doubt that they are anything but accurate, then the French police are doing this routinely. The fact that authorities up to now, their superiors, the city authorities, the departmental authorities, and indeed the national authorities, had not opened an investigation, had not responded until the publication of our report, did suggest that they were well aware, or if they were not well aware, they should have been aware of these kinds of widespread allegations and should have done something to address them. The fact that they have now announced the opening of investigations is a very positive step, of course, and it remains to be seen how those investigations are taken. They should be able to receive the widest possible range of evidence. And if it's appropriate, of course, these investigations should result in discipline for individual officers.
Let me put that to Emeric, because I can see you shaking your head there, Emeric, but I want to ask you, how is it that French police are allowed or have been allowed to abuse women and children while they've been sleeping?
Well, first of all, we have to say that these accusations are based on the testimony of only 60 migrants, whereas there have been thousands of migrants, of illegal migrants, that have been going through Calais since now more than a year. So we have to wait for the results of the investigation that the Ministry of Interior just started a few days ago, and we'll see what will be happening. But I want to, on the contrary, reward our police because it's doing a great job there. You know, they are working in very hard conditions. I'm talking about trying to save those migrants, because many of them actually risk their life by trying to get into trucks to go to England, or because there are lots of riots between the illegal immigrants because they are for different communities, between Christians and Muslims, for instance, or between Afghanistan people and between Iraqi. So, I mean, they are doing a great job there.
There's actually
it's chaos,
fighting taking place between refugees from different parts of the country.
Yes, there have been a lot, and the police is trying to make that happen as a few cases only. But it's difficult there because obviously it's chaos. Calais is a small city in France. It's not supposed to become a place where refugees were supposed to come. You know, many of them actually want to go to England. So we actually have to negotiate with England so that they could host them. But the truth is also that there are many of them who are not refugees, who are only here for economic reasons, and those have nothing to do in France.
Michael, Emeric makes a fair point there. There are a lot of people in Calais, a lot of migrants in Calais who aren't fleeing persecution. They aren't in fear of their lives. They're causing an enormous problem for security services. They're trying to get through the Channel Tunnel on a daily basis. And do they have a right to be in Calais?
Well, I think we're conflating a couple of different things. First of all, it is not true to say that the majority are not fleeing for their lives. In fact, what we know, and consistently what we've seen from other groups, is that the majority are coming from either very repressive countries or war-torn countries such as Syria and so on, Afghanistan among them. We know that if people had access to the asylum system based on recognition rates in France, their chances of getting asylum are greater than even, that is, and actually quite good. We also know that many people do not know about the possibility of seeking asylum in France, and we know that many people have so far thought that France is not a safe option for them because their contact with French authorities is police using spray on them, possibly hitting them with batons and so on. And then finally, we're not talking about, in these instances, we're not talking about people attempting to board lorries. We're not talking about people attempting to sneak onto ferries. We're not talking about riots in which there would be an argument for use of force. What we're talking about are sleeping adults and even children who are being sprayed by police, woken up, having their sleeping bags and clothing confiscated. This is not appropriate police conduct. This is not good policing practice. In fact,
if I may, obviously I am condemning.
Emeric, I think the point here is, you know, these people, whatever their situation, must be treated with a degree of humanity and dignity. Even your own president has said that they should be treated with dignity. But it's taken a court order. A court has had to order the French government to provide these people with fresh drinking water, with toilets and showers, things that you and I take for granted. Why are they having to face such inhumane conditions?
No, but I totally agree with you. I mean, if there have been abuses, they will be punished. And this is what the government said. But, you know, I am not from the government. I am in the opposition. We live in a democratic country.
Yeah, an opposition that's benefited from a rising fear about immigration. I mean, your party has made great gains because of the anti-migrant sentiment that is sweeping across Europe, hasn't it?
Well, I don't think anybody is gaining from anti-migrant sentiments or whatsoever. We are, you know, everybody is in this world.
You're saying that Marine Le Pen hasn't tried to capitalise on the immigration issue.
I am a politician, so I have to think, No, I mean, I am a politician. I have to think about French general interest. You're speaking to an NGO ambassador, so, I mean, he's obviously not talking with the same aims. What I contest in my country is that the government is, for instance, helping to create camps like in Calais or whatsoever, but at the same time is deleting more than 100 million of public aid for development that's supposed to go to, for instance, African countries. So this lack of coherence, I mean, we have to help the development in the countries where they come from, and we shouldn't accept people who arrive and impose themselves to France. Because, you know, when you come to France, you have to follow rules. Because we live in a state of law. And there are rules to come to France.
France has to follow the rules as well. France has signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights. France has signed up to the Refugee Convention. So France also has obligations, doesn't it?
Once again, the Ministry of the Interior is making an investigation. We are not going to put policemen in jail because of an NGO report that is based on 60 declarations. Once again, there have been thousands of migrants who tried to live in Calais. And the policemen are working in very hard conditions. And if they have been abused, they will be punished, and I want them to be punished.
But that
There's
aside,
nothing to do. You know,
aside from the Human Rights Watch report,
in general.
Aside from the Human Rights Watch report, Sangatte was closed down, the jungle was bulldozed. Only now has the French government said that, OK, finally it's going to open a couple of reception centres away from Calais. What I'm saying is, why are these people being allowed to wander around and live rough in Calais? Why aren't they being looked after before it gets to this stage where you require a court order to bring humanitarian assistance to these people?
Because they used to have a camp there, but then the government decided to destroy it and to put all the migrants everywhere in France, sometimes in small villages, such as in my area in Maine-et-Loire, in the West region, and then they weren't supposed to have any camps anymore. The problem is that the illegal immigration is so high in our country that this camp is now recreated.
Yeah, Michael, Emerick makes a good point there, that this is something a lot of the French authorities have been talking about. If you build more reception centres, you are encouraging a problem on their doorstep.
The problem is, as we all know, already there, in that there are people who are coming to Europe and, of course, going on through other European countries to France. Part of the answer, which France has not yet adequately addressed, is to provide appropriate reception conditions at the start. That is, if they're crossing over from Italy, giving them appropriate accommodation, access to the asylum system, information about the asylum system from the outset. That isn't really being done. Secondly, we've been here before with these temporary centers. Right after the camp in Calais closed at the end of October, kids and adults were shipped to temporary centers. A problem immediately was that they were not part of the regular protection system in the case of children, because the hope was that many would be taken by Britain, which, as we know, happened to a certain extent, but certainly not to any large extent. I think where we agree is that this is not solely France's responsibility. This is a European-wide problem. We need to have a European-wide solution so that the distribution of refugees and asylum seekers is a fair one. But I think that it is an important point to remember that whatever one may do, whatever France or other countries may do to address conditions in the home countries, there are always going to be people who are going to be coming to Europe and coming to France to seek asylum, and that really is the framework that is contemplated in the Refugee Convention, which France has signed up to. France accepts an obligation to take asylum seekers who arrive within the country, and that's not improper, right? If you have no choice but to flee your situation and seek safety somewhere else.
But Emeric is saying that, you know, they closed down, France closed down Sangatte and France closed down the jungle, and still these people still keep coming. It's a never-ending problem. Why do refugees keep returning to Calais? Obviously, to try and get into the UK.
And they do so because many of them have given up on France, even after being relocated from Calais the first time, or these other camps the first time. So nobody wants migrants and asylum seekers living rough, living in the woods, living in camps like this. That's not ideal for anybody. I think the question is how best to manage this such that we can have appropriate access to protective services, appropriate access to basic necessities. Those things I think are incontrovertible. What France cannot do, and what it seems police are doing on a routine basis, is making life so miserable, including through really abusive, cruel, and human degrading treatment, that the hope is that migrants move on, and that's just not appropriate.
Emeric, what do you think of President Macron's proposal to open European-run reception centres in Africa to try and discourage migrants from heading to Europe in the first place?
We know that if many of them cross, for instance, the Mediterranean Sea, it will be difficult for them to come back. And so it's less risky as well. So I think to me it's more important, in fact, to create camps there that will help the population where it comes from and where it actually lives. Because as he said, nobody wants to live in woods, nobody wants to live in poverty, whether in Europe or in Africa. But it's probably more easy for us to help them in their countries than help them where we live, because our debt is very high. We are, for instance, at the moment decreasing housing aid for. Sometimes the government is saying that we're going to give 200 million to create new housing for illegal migrants, and so the French people don't understand. Why should they make effort for people who don't come from their country and who don't pay taxes? Once again, I am a politician. I think about national interest, and an NGO is not thinking about national interest. It's about as a citizen of the world, or as the world interest. I think everybody is in this world right now.
Okay. Final question to Michael, because it seems that most of the initiatives and proposals that are coming from not just France but other European countries are to reduce the number of migrants coming to European shores rather than helping migrants who are already on their shores. I mean, it's a very difficult and complex situation, and there is no easy answer, is there?
Absolutely, these are difficult questions. Camps in Libya are not really the answer, though. We've been here before with this kind of proposal to outsource, to have offshore facilities. Libya itself is not in a condition to administer any sort of protective system, including even one that's funded largely by the European Union. Libya is also the place where, for those that are coming through that country in transit to Europe, is a country where a great number of migrants are reporting serious abuses, kidnappings, rapes, all sorts of violence in the course of extortion. This is not a safe place by any means for migrants, and so there would be grave doubts even in that respect as to whether it's an appropriate location. And finally, we have to recognize what other countries in... Yep, go ahead.
Just finish your thought, Michael.
As to the numbers that Europe is taking, that France is taking, we have to recognize that in no way does that compare with the numbers that we're seeing hosted by countries in the region, particularly Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey. The numbers are quite enormous and do show that with sufficient political will, you can take on much larger numbers. France is in a far better position to take on what's really a very small percentage of its population than any of these countries is.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed for joining me, Michael Bohenik and Emeric Merlot. Thank you.